Hello and welcome in, everybody. Caleb Hutchins here with you for AccessWDUN.com, and we've got a little bit of a special feature for you today. We're joined by several members of various law enforcement agencies around Northeast Georgia here to talk about school threats. The school year just ended, so obviously something that we're not dealing with right now, but something that we dealt with a lot this past year. Obviously, we had the shooting at Appalachia High School in Barrow County back in September and saw a lot of school threats in the year that followed it, and in particular, 3 threats that happened right towards the end of the school year in Hall, Forsyth, and Barrow counties that were particularly frightening and had very similar MOs, if you will. And so we wanted to talk about that, but also just school threats and the issues that law enforcement is facing with that at large. I've got with me here today Lieutenant Dan Franklin with the Hall County Sheriff's Office, Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith, and then Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman. And guys, first off, thanks for being here. I wanted to start by talking about those specific 3 threats that we had. Just for clarity, we had one on April 21st at Chestatee High School in Hall County. The next one that we had was 8 days later on April 29th at DeSanta Middle School in southern Forsyth County. And then we actually had it happen at 5 different schools on the same day, I believe was the number, in Barrow County. So, Lieutenant Franklin, I guess to start off with, let's just get a recap of what happened with those incidents, and we'll start with you, Lieutenant Franklin, and work our way down. But walk us through what happened that day at Chestatee High School.
So Chestatee High School received a call directly to the front office of the school from a male subject who advised that he had recently lost his job and was despondent and upset. He had placed explosives, black backpacks with explosives in the wood line, and had said he was in the woods with a rifle and planned to shoot students as the school was being evacuated.
So the next one that we had timeline-wise was in Forsyth County at DeSanta. So Sheriff Freeman, kind of detail that one for me, if you will.
Well, the DeSanta one was a little different. So what we had was a teenager from DeSanta Middle School, a student, who had created an online gaming relationship with a 10-year-old in a northeastern state. And through that online gaming relationship, the DeSanta Middle School student decided that, I guess, didn't want to go to school, didn't want to take the end-of-year test, and they concocted a plan together to call in bomb threats. Called on 2 different days, called in bomb threats. And, of course, as you'll hear on this panel, I'm quite confident everybody will tell you, there is no such thing as a non-existent or minor threat, right? Every threat has to be taken completely seriously, has to be exhaustively investigated until that. And, of course, when we got to the end of that, we were able to track the 10-year-old in the northeastern state, and we were able to track the DeSanta Middle School student. Both were charged. The northeastern states dealt with that there. We charged there. We found there was no threat of true violence, but yet it created a disruption in the school and certainly frightened parents and students.
And then on May 2nd, we had the incident in Barrow County, and Sheriff Smith kind of outlined that. That was certainly the most complex one of the bunch from the standpoint of there were 5 different schools who received these threats on the same day.
Yeah, we got our first Centegix alert, same thing like at Hall County at Chestatee. The front desk lady received a phone call from a person. The number comes up, but it deleted when she answered the phone and said, there are black backpacks, bombs in the school. If you come out, I will shoot the kids as they come out. It's almost like that, almost verbatim. After we're clearing that building, we get another one at Yargo Elementary. Then we get it at Appalachia, where the incident happened on the 4th. Then we got one at Windabara High School, and then we got another one at Kennedy. So we feel like the caller was looking up information. Now, what this caller was doing was they were looking at a map, and they were saying, I'm on this road, and had us ghost chasing, if you will. We realized real quick that they're not. So the good thing is that we had sent out information to the schools that, hey, if your front office gets these numbers, try to get the number. We worked with Comcast, who has those lines, and we've gotten some numbers off that, and we're still working with the federal authorities because we have determined that it's out of state where this is going and being spoofed, if you will.
I think the information that Lieutenant Franklin and Sheriff Freeman gave us kind of answers this question ahead of time, but the first question that I kind of had when we had these incidents, because they did kind of have very similar MOs, were these related, or do these appear to just be different individuals just so happen to be in the same part of the state within a 8-day period?
So we feel like ours was isolated. I don't think our 2 offenders had anything to do with a Barrow or Hall County. There's nothing to lead us to that. We've pretty exhaustively gotten through that investigation. We're complete with that, and there's nothing to indicate that. So I'll let them speak to whether they think there was similarity between offenders.
Yeah, based on the similarities between the details on our case and the Barrow County case, that's likely related. That suspect is using means to mask whatever number he's calling from. So we have an intelligence unit that did some research. It took them a day or so. When somebody calls from a regular phone number, it's fairly easy and fairly quick process to figure out who owns the number and to try to trace it. But with the way this person was calling, that was masked, so it took a little bit to find that information. But what we found out was similar calls came from the same number in several states. We had Florida, Texas, and I believe a similar threat was called in to a Golden State Warriors basketball game in California. And so we were in touch with the agencies in Florida and Texas, and also with the FBI office in LA to see if we could all work together to try to come up with a solution.
Sheriff Smith, I think, went through pretty well the response there, but Lieutenant Franklin and Sheriff Freeman, can you guys talk a little bit more about how you guys respond? I mean, because that's a threat, obviously, that is not an everyday kind of situation. Talk about what the response was to Chestatee High School and to Santa Middle School, and either one of y'all can start when those threats came in, and kind of for the public to know what you guys were doing to sort of respond.
So with the Santa Middle School, that threat came in at the end of the day. So we dismissed students in normal because of the time that the threat came in. We then took our bomb dogs. I think Hall County sent us some. We had 4 different agencies. We had 6 bomb dogs, and we did an exhaustive sweep. We felt like from the voice, from listening to the front desk, that this was a child. And while we thought in the beginning this could likely be a hoax, you can't take any chances. So we spent hours upon hours. As you can imagine, 6 bomb dogs searching an elementary school is not a small task. It's a large school, and we did an exhaustive search of that. And, of course, another threat came in with the same voice from the same place the next day. And so by that point, our high-tech crimes unit and our school resource officer program were already investigating that and getting close to. But same thing, they were trying to mask. I think this is a really important thing for people to know. If you think you can mask your number and we can't find it, it's a little more difficult, but we can find it. And just like this 10-year-old in Maine found out, we can find you.
Lieutenant Franklin with the incident at Chestatee.
So with Chestatee, unfortunately, based on things like Appalachia and other things that are going on in the country, our response was pretty much an all-in response. Any available unit was on the way. I fly drones for the agency, so I responded, put the drone up. And in this case, because the threat was students would be shot as they were being evacuated, what we had to do was lock down the school and keep all the students inside. And so we established a central command. We searched the perimeter where the backpacks we were told they would be, or likely be. Searched those areas with the drone, with explosive dogs, and also just did a manual search. Had somebody walk the wood line to make sure that those things did not exist. And then at that point, we were put in a position where we had to clear the school, classroom by classroom. So it was a large undertaking.
So I thought it'd be good to ask the three of you while we're here, because when these incidents happen, obviously it's pretty scary to the public, especially those who have kids and family members who are at those schools. And the information that we're able to provide is basically what you guys are able to provide for us in the moment. And I know it's a very chaotic situation, but when you have one of these threats, when you ultimately reach the point that it's deemed to not be credible, the school can resume normal activities, which I know the school system has to be involved in that decision as well. But I guess my question is, because whenever we publish these stories, we always get people asking, what do you mean the threat's not credible? My kid's at the school. You guys just going to let everything act like nothing happened? I know that you're not acting like nothing happened, but walk us through, if you will, the process of how you reach a determination that this threat's not credible. Kids can resume school activities. The school can resume its normal activities.
Yeah. So I'll lead off. Look, social media is social media, and things grow legs really fast. And so as soon as it's usually not us giving the initial notice that, hey, there's been a threat at school, it's happening in 50 different legs, right? Every student is texting their parents, texting their friends. They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, you name it, they're on, Snapchat. And so a lot of legs start growing. When I say legs, a lot of disinformation starts growing really fast. Sometimes it's accurate, but a lot of it is disinformation. And so we have to get down to the root. And so, in Forsyth County, I can only speak to Forsyth. We just added 2 juvenile detectives who do threat assessment. Their main job is to do threat assessment on school threats. Those are 2 new positions that we've added this year. We're sending them all over the country to get trained on threat assessment. So when a threat comes in, we immediately go to the source of the information. We track that down. We go to that. We interview those witnesses. We interview who. A lot of times it's, well, I heard from Sally, who heard from Ben, who heard from Jim, who heard from Linda. And we have to get to Linda. So we have to interview all those people. And I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We do that. We're knocking on parents' doors at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we'll eventually get to, this is the person who allegedly said the threatening thing or posted the threatening thing. Then we get to that house. We work with those parents. We determine if we need to do search warrants. We do an actual threat assessment. There is a form and a scale where we look at the child's history. We look at what the threat is. We look at what the parents say. We look at accessibility to weapons, all these kind of things to score, right? Threat assessment. And we work with our school safety department as we're doing that. So when we take all those things into consideration, what we oftentimes, and again, there, just like in this other case, there was an arrest, but what we often find is in the aftermath of the Appalachia shooting, we had, as everybody did across the country, had these host of threats come in. But a lot of times, what a kid reported, hey, I heard them talking about shooting up a school. When we got to the bottom of it, what it was 2 kids talking about what they would do if somebody tried to shoot their school up, or how horrible the Appalachia incident was. They were discussing a school shooting, not committing an act of violence. And while we're very grateful for students reporting that, because one day that will solve and keep people safe, when we say sometimes that, hey, there's no credible threat, it came to that, right? It was 2 kids talking about how horrible the thing that happened in Appalachia was. They weren't talking about committing an act of violence. And so I think when you hear those terms, we do that. But we can't say that Linda Johnson, I'm making up a name, is the one who told us this, or we interviewed Billy Bob, the 13-year-old, who said this. Those are juveniles, and we can't legally release that information. But we're tracking that to the very end.
I think the state legislature tried to address this year, and I know that they passed some legislation that involves a database for kids who might have shown signs that they could be a potential threat, so that school systems, law enforcement agencies are aware. I think it's something that everybody's kind of trying to grapple with right now. If you have somebody make a threat, how do you determine, right, whether this is a person who is trying to get attention or is this somebody who is a real threat? Sheriff Smith, I know obviously you guys had the worst case scenario at Appalachia, so you guys saw firsthand this happen. How has that has there been any, I guess, internal review of how you look at these sort of situations when you have a situation where a kid makes a threat of trying to assess things? Because I know that Colt Gray, and I know we can't speak to Jackson County handled that investigation. They're not here. You can't speak to that, but internally, how do you address those sort of situations?
So like Sheriff Freeman has, we have 2 juvenile investigators that are only going to deal with threat assessments with our public safety director of the school system and the assistant director now in light of what happened. But the new law is basically we do that. If we have a child or someone brings that threat to us, we've seen how that's worked in other agencies, and we've decided to go that route as well. As far as the threat goes in the laws, we take everyone seriously. 2 days after September the 4th, we took 3 kids into custody that we're specifically talking about, I'd like to see, or I want to do what happened at Appalachia, and we took that as a threat. Now, we're on a little more heightened in a lot of reasons, and for a lot of reasons, and our parents are on edge in Barrow County. I want to hit to the point that the sheriff said, on social media, they and somebody know more than all of us. And when you ask them the question, well, who is they? Well, they said, or somebody. Those they get legs quick. And we had parents the day of this incident and the day after, and multiple days of the bombing in May, bomb threats. They were asking, well, why did you do this or why do you do that? Well, sometimes we don't drop what we're doing. We want to make sure your children are safe, and in this case, they're safe. and we do everything we can to make sure that it may be credible because someone's calling it in, but as we dig down to the root of it, like the sheriff said, is that we find it that way. But at that particular case, we actually told the parents, which we're kind of hamstringed after what happened the September the 4th. Parents are on edge. And so when that happened, we said, sure, give us a minute. Don't come to the school. We're getting to the bottom of it. They came anyways, rightfully so. And then they're demanding to know. They want to know the juvenile that said it. They want us to perp walk them, put their picture on a billboard, and have them expelled. In this case, we're still looking into it. And sometimes we don't find this young man's a juvenile. He can't be posted on Forsyth County page. We can't put his picture on a billboard or in the newspaper. We can't do that. There are laws that govern that, and we have to follow the laws, unlike the suspects that don't. But as far as the new laws go, as far as it's a felony threat, and if we do find them, they're going to be charged with it. But it doesn't hamstring us, but we have found that kids like this, they want to get views and clicks in their world, and they are determined by how many views and clicks they have. That's their status. And so these kids get on these gaming worlds, and I'm sorry that's where it's at, and they'll make a comment thinking it's cute and funny. Sheriff said it ain't cute and funny because you have expended thousands of dollars of resources and instilled fear, and you did it in our community where we were already in fear enough. And so that we take that personally.
Lieutenant Franklin, I remember when the shooting happened at Appalachia. I can't remember what day of the week it was. I feel like it was early in the week, though. And in the days after that, I remember in the newsroom here, we were constantly in communication with the Hall County Sheriff's Office because I feel like we had 5 or 7 school threats just in the 2 or 3 days after the Appalachia shooting. That's got to put strain on a law enforcement agency, I'm sure, especially when everybody's on heightened alert where, you know, like Sheriff Freeman just said, we just saw this happen not far from us and everybody's terrified.
Absolutely. And it's also, you know, it's frustrating that you spend all this time and effort. But just like the sheriff said, that we have to look at them all as if they are 100% authentic. We have to keep moving forward until we figure out whether it's legit or not. And so that we, in the days after Appalachia, we spent all our time doing that. But the other thing that happened is that everybody that, whether they had meaning behind it or not, and most of them were not, if they said it, they went to ROADC. And
Yeah,
we had the support of our juvenile courts and our juvenile judges, and we filled the ROIDC up in the week after Appalachia.
And I'd like to say in an event like September the 4th, everybody else gets on alert. It happened to us directly, and we understand. But I would fault another agency if they didn't try to look and see and learn from that. If they weren't, and they were like, "Oh, it ain't gonna happen here." I didn't think it happened to us, and we're learning now what worked and what didn't work. And these agencies came that day, and have been supportive. I had Forsyth County and Hall County dogs the day of the May 2nd incident. So I mean, we help each other in that type situation. So everybody's on alert as it is, like you said. But I like to say that, you know, would we look at it differently prior to September 4th? Maybe. Would we be looking at things different? But now, since that happened, it's a good thing that we have our ears up, if you will, and kind of knowing that's happening. So,
Sheriff Freeman, we'll start with you and work our way down the table from there. But my last question was, what is the message that you guys have been trying to send to the community? And I guess it's kind of a two-pronged question, right? Because you've got obviously a message that you've got to send to these students and parents who might, you know, these students who might be committing these threats. And then you've also got a message to the community at large of trying to, you know, reassure everybody of safety at school. What has that messaging been like, and what are you guys trying to tell the community?
Sure. That's a great question. So the answer is it's not done in isolation. I cannot keep Forsyth County schools safe by myself. And I don't mean me individually. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office cannot. It is a community issue to keep schools safe. We have really championed, and it started in the world of terrorism, the see something, say something. And the vast majority of the tips that we have gotten that have led to arrest or just clearance of a case where it turned out to be, as I said earlier, just miscommunication. But even in cases that were severe and led to arrest, It was students and parents who called that in. They hear it and they see it long before law enforcement will. And it is that communication, that trust factor, and getting those students to understand that that's how they keep themselves safe. Look, it is unfair to have to ask students to be vigilant, to be safe in their own school. But it is the world we live in. And parents, students, staff, and law enforcement all have to work together. And we have had incredible success in both students and parents calling us to report when they hear something. I will get 50 personal messages when something goes on social media, as well as all the 911 calls. So, that's the biggest message that we send. The message to those that will, especially the ones who like to do hoax, that think it's funny, or they're looking for clicks or looking for whatever. Oh, I'll make it funny for you, because I will put your butt in jail. I don't care if you're 12 years old. I don't care if you're 18 years old. I will put you in jail. And if you try to hurt our kids, one of the 57 deputies assigned to our school system will hurt you back. I make no bones about that. Okay, it sounds harsh, but if you try to seriously harm our kids, we will stop you in whatever it takes to stop you. I make no bones about that. But those that think it's funny, you're not going to think it's funny when you're sitting in RYDC or in our jail overnight. It becomes a lot less funny, and I've talked to a lot of these kids who have done that. But the biggest is to see something, say something. This is, I am convinced, how we keep our kids safe.
Echo what the sheriff said. The see something, say something is impeccably. It works impeccably better than what we expected. I will take a step further, that if a parent knows that this child is doing this, we don't have a problem locking up the parent. We'll take you to jail too. We did
Amen.
that. We did that in the Gray case, and we will send you to prison as well. A dangerous place to be in is threatening a mama or dad's child. It's a very dangerous place to be in, and we take that very seriously. And the resources aside, they're there. The good thing is we got counties and we got cities that help us when events like this happen. And people say, well, what did it cost? That's what people want to know, what it cost. What it cost was the safety of that child should be able to freely walk in that school to get a free education, because they're required to get it and do it in a conducive learning environment, not in a prison-type setting, to keep them safe. But it goes back to what he said. It's a community effort. And if a threat goes on in Forsyth and it's tied to Barrow County, his folks are calling me, and vice versa. Or in Hall County or Winder or Savannah. If I get it, I'm going to call that sheriff or chief and say, hey, this kid said this is going to happen. And that happens sometimes. It'll be linked. The good thing is that we mean just as much business. We lost tragically 4 people and injured 9. So we don't mind locking up who needs to go to jail, and trying to figure it out. But we don't, when it comes to our children, which is one of our most precious commodities to us in our communities, you start poking kids, you poke the bear, and you're going to find out what mama bears are really about.
Lieutenant Franklin.
So the thing that I think is a good takeaway, and I'm talking to parents of students and students themselves, is to invest in and maintain good relationships with your school resource officers and your school administrators. Because we talked about lists of folks who are deemed risks and that kind of thing. I can tell you that any of the school resource officers in any 3 of these school systems know who those people are and know who the threats are, and they keep a good eye on them, but they can't watch them all the time. So a student should work to make their approach to their school resource officer administrators easy. Don't look at them in a light where they're not approachable. That way it's easy for you to go and say something. The only other thing, because we know it's going to happen, is as these threats come in the future to everybody involved, just be careful what you say and what you put out on social media, because a lot of people will take that as gospel, and it can get out of hand quick. If there's a lack of information flowing, that's because from an investigation standpoint, we have to maintain the integrity of these investigations, and we got to make sure that we're careful with what we release, so that we may be able to use that in the future. Because as we're working through these threats, we're not thinking about minute to minute. We're thinking about when we have to take this to trial in 1.5 years or 2 years from now. And so we have to make decisions that keep that in mind.
I know I said a second ago that was my last question, but I did want to end on this. We're going into the summer now. School year's over, so I know the school threat issue is for the next 2 months not going to be one that's right on the forefront of everybody's mind, like it has been over this last school year. Is the summer going to give you all some time, you think, to maybe continue to look into protocol, continue to look into reviewing things to try to improve things ahead of the next school year? Because I know that this happened in the middle of the school year. Then we had all the threats. I know it was a kind of a hectic time. Does the summer allow law enforcement agencies to kind of say, hey, we've got a couple of months to look at this again and sort of reassess what we're doing?
For sure.
I'll be honest with you, we're ever evolving, and if my SROs and I know these men are the same way. We're never gonna lull out. Our SROs are constantly trying to retrain and do stuff, and when the new laws come into effect with the school in July 1, we've got to prepare for those new laws and those things and those changes we have. So I know all three of our agencies are state accredited and federally accredited. I mean, so we're ever watching our policies and how we can make them better to streamline for the communities that we serve. So
I was with about 25 of our SROs, just happened to be yesterday, or in training. And so during the summertime, we take that as an opportunity to do a 2-week intentional training just with our SROs, where we specifically train on things from de-escalation to active shooter to working with our school advocacy specialists, which are like crisis counselors that Forsyth County has, who track those kids and work with those kids who are at risk, right, that you were mentioning kind of earlier, right? So we know who they are, and we're providing resources up front. We want to help them, not hurt them. And so just yesterday they're doing that. Our juvenile detectives who do threat assessment, I think they're headed out next week or the week after to a seminar on threat assessment. So we're constantly training for that. And we're looking forward to working with that. Our real-time crime center and the school's safety department are now linked together. We can now see school cameras, things we couldn't do. So we've taken a lot of steps that we're continuing to look. That is that constant evolution the sheriff was talking about that we have to take. You can never rest on your laurels or think you're good enough. There's always something you can do better, and it's constant improvement.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you stopping by here. You guys, I know you guys from Hall County are right down the road, but Sheriff Smith and Sheriff Freeman coming from Barrow, Forsyth County here to Gainesville to talk about with us today, we really appreciate it. And thanks for all you guys do every day for the community. We appreciate it.
Much appreciate it.
We appreciate it.